Hey folks, welcome back to the Pulse. My name's Matt. This is Crypto Heartbeat. It is 1:30 Central Texas time, and we are back. It is Thursday, May 16th, and I want to welcome you back to the Pulse. Folks, it is an interesting time in crypto. I'm sure you're feeling it too, right? And you thought long ago this should have been over and we should be up and to the right. And of course, what do we do when we have idle hands? Folks, today we're going to be talking about tokenizing the world. What does it look like and why? And who's out there tokenizing the world? And what responsibility do we have if we're defending DeFi, if we're building the alternative financial system? And that's what I would say to you we're doing. If we actually were all on the same page, which we're not, obviously, we'd all come around the fact that we're building the alternative financial system. Well, you think about this options, having options to do something else. Right now, you feel like you have a lot of options. In the future, you may not have many, or at least the options that are available to you, you will not be interested in. And so we're going to be talking about that. And I'm going to share with you a video from your friend and mine, Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock. Boy, your favorite guy, I'm sure. And I want you to hear what he has to say because it is ominous. And it's interesting because you have to understand the nature and character of the characters in the financial system and what they're planning to do. While we're fiddling around with all kinds of strategies and meme coins and LP and all this stuff, meanwhile, those that actually have the money are seeking to enslave us. And it's going to be obvious. They're saying it out loud. So we're going to look at what that looks like here today. But first, we're going to say hello to you, and I welcome you back. We got Sam Kemp here. He's number one. Looking forward to seeing you next week, my friend. And thanks for the response so quick. Robbie Creates. What's up, Robbie? Good to see you. Taryn, blessed day, everyone. Yes, it is an alternative financial system, and we get to create it. Richard Hart has provided us with the framework. And to think about this, what is the goal of most people that are building? Create the next 10,000x, create the next hex, up and to the right. And it's mostly driven by profits. And so what do? We don't think long term, we think short term because, the reason that people got into this and the thing that fuels it all is like, I want to get rich and I want to get rich now. And, you think about this, the long term of this is you might participate in the casino, but ultimately the house wins. And what we're basically saying is we don't want it to be a casino. We want it to be a fair alternative system. At least that's what I want. And I think anyone that's practical would say, well, where does this lead? Right? You dance with the devil in the pale moonlight. What do you expect? And so if you're going to play in that game, you might win yourself, but do you have a responsibility in making this place look like that place? That's how I see it. It's called the kingdom. And what does that look like? It's obviously not like it is now. And so I'm going to share with you this video of Larry Fink, and we're going to make some commentary about this. I'm going to talk about a vision that we have to tokenize the world and how this fits in with Richard and his plan, because I think it's really what he's doing, and he needs our help. He really needs our help, and we can all play a role in that. And if you watch this program, you realize that we talk about things that I think are more aligned with the very framework of creation. There's a framework that you live in, right? Every time I've knocked something off the table, it's fallen down, not up. And so you kind of got to go with the prevailing wind. Well, what's the prevailing wind? Well, you got to work with the system. You go with the flow, not with those who are trying to draw you off sides. But we're going to chart our own course, and we have a great leader in Richard Hart, and we have infrastructure we can build on. The question is, do we have vision? Because without vision, the people perish. Taryn, thanks for being here. John May, what's up, man? It's so great to have you back. Timothy Harris, what is up? Salutations, Matt, and everyone. And Miss Quinn, great to see you with the wrench there. Much love, y'all. Hit the likes. Thanks for being here. I appreciate it. One of the great things that's been happening as I've been streaming, and I'm going to start to be streaming a lot more because we got some big announcements coming. You're aware that we're working on a decentralized exchange, but more has come, more opportunity has come to us in the meantime. And I'm really excited about it. And that's why you've seen these last two streams from me, really all about real world assets and the tokenization of real world assets and what that means. And I'm going to break that down for you because really tokenizing the world could be a really good thing or a really bad thing. And that's really ultimately what we're going to talk about. DJ Bomber, Anders, good to see you. Crypto Compassion, what's up, buddy? Good to see you. All right. So here, let's take a look at our friend Larry Fink.
Explain that move into ETFs. How far does it go?
When we bought BGI in 2009, we were ridiculed by most of the financial community saying you cannot marry the culture, who we were, and a passive culture. And we said, why? Our clients use both products. Our job is to be agnostic to our clients, to work with our clients, and to provide a whole portfolio solution. But over time, more and more clients started to think about, how do I want to get an exposure? Do I want an exposure in this area or this product? And I could do that through actively investing in ETFs. In 2012, we said, ETFs are going to be the new engine for fixed income. And boy, did that get a lot of ridicule by many people in the business community. And today, the fixed income markets are totally imbued by ETFs. And so at BlackRock, when we bought BGI, we had $290 billion of ETFs. Today, we have $3.5 trillion. And then this week alone,
braggadocious.
Just yesterday, we launched the iShares Bitcoin ETF. And so I would say to you, if we could ETF a Bitcoin, imagine what we could do with all financial instruments. And so what we announced in our architectural change, iShares was this business division in itself. And we thought that's too exclusive. We needed to include the ethos, the philosophy, the spirituality of what iShares can provide in everything we do at BlackRock, because we believe we're just halfway there in the ETF revolution, that everything is going to be ETF'd. And we needed to ensure both active products, passive products, digital products are going to be used through the vehicle of ETFs. At the same time, in this architectural change, we're elevating the whole concept that we are going to be curating more and more of our performance-based products too. So it's a very large architectural change. A lot of people have asked me, iShares is the most successful division within BlackRock. Look what it did. Why are you doing this now? And we believe it's so important to be anticipating the next move. I would also say on the beginnings of a ETF Bitcoin, we believe ETFs are a technology no different than Bitcoin was a technology for asset storage. We believe the next step going forward will be the tokenization of financial assets. And that means every stock, every bond will have its own, basically, CUSIP. It'll be on one general ledger. Every investor, you and I, will have our own number, our own identification. We can rid ourselves of all issues around illicit activities about bonds and stocks and digital by having a tokenization. But the most importantly thing, we can customize strategies through tokenization that fits every individual. We would have instantaneous settlement. Think about all the costs of settling bonds and stocks. But if you had a tokenization, everything would be immediate because it's just a line item. And so we believe this is a technological transformation for financial assets. I believe if you want to talk about voting and voting choice and all the things, if we know every moment who is the owner of that stock and it's now time to vote, every individual who has ownership is identified and they can vote their own shares.
Is this the end of mutual funds?
I think, well, a lot of people, it's a wrapper. It's not the.
Okay. Did you hear what I heard? I mean, this is why I say tokenization could be a good thing or a bad thing. And we have to understand what's being said here. And this is why it's so important to me. So this idea of tokenizing the world, what are the benefits of tokenization? Well, what they're saying is, well, this is going to be much more efficient, right? It is. Also, you're probably hearing what I'm hearing, is this is ultimate consolidation, right? I think they're really excited. They're like, we're going to ETF everything. That was kind of that iShares plan. But this idea of, well, hold on a second, we could tokenize this. Well, if you take any time to investigate, why would someone, that's as big as BlackRock change their entire architecture to go towards the tokenization of assets if there wasn't a benefit for them? And so what's the benefit? You notice he was saying you're going to have a number, an ID, right? As an investor, we're going to know every investor and everything. See, the threat to the financial system from DeFi is the fact that they can't consolidate it. And I make a point on this program all the time to share with you how important it is that we stand up and stick up for DeFi, that it actually continues to exist. And it's under attack, obviously, because the enemy of consolidation is anonymity. They want you to be known. This is just like all of it, right? You need to have a digital ID. We need to know everything that you're doing. But the real purpose is, if you can take something, let's say, that has a lot of value, and then you can break it up into many pieces, that means you can expose that product to more investors. And you know as well as I do that there are fees associated with trades. And if you just take all of these things and say, they're going to tokenize the world, all of these assets, and bring them underneath their tokenization model and their exchanges, is that you want more volume, right? This is ultimately a massive windfall when it comes to, the volume. Because if you can take something that's, and I'm using this kind of facetiously, but take the Mona Lisa, right? What's the value of the Mona Lisa? Well, it has value and it sits in that museum. But if you could have a piece of it, well, what does that really mean? Are you cutting off a piece of the Mona Lisa? No, you're basically taking that value, bringing it into the digital space, cutting it up into pieces, and making money from the trading, right? It's backed by this real world asset, whatever it may be: real estate, art, commodities, anything you want. But as you can see, the folks at BlackRock, and there's a whole list of them, right? JP Morgan Chase, everybody is seeing this as this massive opportunity, because right now, you think about, the trading, this is the picks and shovels in the gold rush. It's all it is. If you want to just boil it down, these are the picks and shovels. That's what JP Morgan Chase, that's what BlackRock sees, is we're going to be the infrastructure for people to do the trading. And if we can increase the volume of trades by taking each of these assets and breaking them into small pieces, and then we can customize it for you based on your ID, then, we can ultimately churn and churn and churn. And who wins in that, right? That brings in new revenue streams, because you had something that was locked up that you only had a handful of buyers, and now you break it up into pieces and you got thousands of buyers. But it's really the buying and selling of that. It's the volume of transactions, and then owning the market. This brings a ton of liquidity in. But I want to make the case to you that we have the opportunity to do the same thing within DeFi, but we can preserve it for what it's worth. Because here's the thing: we're in this technological revolution, as Larry Fink says, but his goal is to centralize it, right? It's to consolidate it. It's to get it under his umbrella. Well, these assets are out there in the hands of regular people. And so think about this for a second. While we're fiddling around with the latest meme coin, these folks are looking at all the assets that they can and gobbling them up for tokenization, right? Once they have the right to tokenize. What's interesting? We would say, well, we're just kind of picking up crumbs off the table. We have to think, I think, a lot more like Richard thinks, right? They're coming for your speech. They're coming for your movement. They're coming for your privacy, coming for your transactions. Well, how do we create an alternative system? Well, if we're going to compete in the future against folks like this, and it actually be an alternative, not just some idea, right? Not just some libertarian, utopia. What a conflict of terms. But if you're actually thinking about it, we have to ultimately have things backed by real assets. Well, there's more of us than there are of them. So think about this for a second. If you look at the Charlie 19, right, the medical emergency, people were concerned, right? And rightfully so. People were dying and concerned. But it got to the point where people took that disruption of that health emergency and took advantage of it for profit. And if you think about that, that's what is happening. And so we see this, this opportunity. And first thing that came was the Bitcoin ETF. Hey, we can take this Bitcoin thing and bring it up underneath our umbrella and let people trade inside. And so when they're trading inside, they're on our platforms, right? They don't have to do all of these other things. And, people like to be babysat, and they like to have somebody handle it for them. An alternative financial system in DeFi is one in which you are the custodian, right? You're controlling the keys to your coins. And it's harder to do. And it's ultimately, obviously, not for everyone. We have to, in the future, if we're going to compete, we're going to have a system that operates outside of, but mirrors the system. So what are we going to need to have? Well, one of the big things we need to have is we need to have a decentralized stablecoin. They're going to have the CBDCs, right? Those are going to be interconnected across all of these centralized banks. Well, what did Richard do when he changed the maker contract? This is the whole premise around the PDAI scenario. Will it ever get pegged? I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball there, but I understand the strategy. And I think it's important that you understand it as well, is that there's a lot of pressure from the people that have the real money. What can we do now to set up a system in which when you realize and wake up that you're like, hold on a second, this was about a flattening the curve. Remember that? We need 2 weeks to flatten the curve, or 2 months, or whatever it may be, then turned into this big opportunity to profit. And profit they did, and print the money they did. And there were winners and there's losers. And, what did we get out of it? Less privacy, more authoritarians. But the same thing is happening. And how do we counteract that, right? We have to have a system. Now, think about this. There are people who talk about decentralization, and then there are the people that really understand it. And Richard, I think, saw this ahead of a lot of everyone else. He was talking about freedom of speech prior to a lot of the things that were happening with the Twitter files. He saw these things ahead of time. And of course, we did the political statement as it relates to PLS and the sacrifice for freedom of speech. But it is so poignant where we are today. And when we look back at that, a lot of people are just judging things based on what the price of the pulse is, right? But this is way more existential than the price chart and, hey, what's the next 10,000x? Now, it'd be nice to get rich in the process, but we have to defend these core freedoms. And if we don't have the major components and infrastructure, we can't compete. And, it's a race. It's ultimately a race. Here's Larry Fink, right? Running the largest organization in the world and probably most influential financially. And he's saying it's like this mad dash to gobble up all of these assets and tokenize them. Well, what should we be doing? Well, we've got a layer one. It's a fork of Ethereum. It's got the system state. It has the potential of having a truly decentralized stablecoin, which would be one of the only ones in the world on a truly decentralized layer one called the Pulse chain. Now, right now, you compare it and you're like, well, what's the total value locked? It's not competing. Well, you don't realize, but the paradigm could change very, very quickly. Right now, it just seems like, well, I've got many flavors to choose from. When in fact, the future is you're going to have one flavor, and that's the flavor of BlackRock. And this is the consolidated centralized powers. We're seeing it happen with the currency. We're seeing it happen with investments. And so how do we counteract that? Well, we have to have a vertically aligned ecosystem that has all the right components in it. But I also believe that we have to have the assets. So we have to do what BlackRock is doing, in the sense that there's all of these people out there that are independent, that realize that centralized authorities, whether governments or corporate alliances, that this is dangerous. It's dangerous to our sovereignty. It's dangerous to our freedom. And we deserve and we demand an alternative. Well, look around. What do you see? Where could you build this decentralized alternative financial system? Cardano? I mean, Charles talks about the right things, but he doesn't have the community, right? There's a lot of smart people there, but it's almost like it's way too nerdy. But if you think about who is in this Pulse Chain community, it is grassroots, the blue collar folks of this world. Whether you see yourself as that or not, I believe that the Pulse Chain is made up with people who have seen hard times. They know what it looks like. They've done work, and they represent, I would say, real people. And I think what's amazing, what attracts people of that caliber and of that experience to Richard Hart, is the fact that it resonates as true. And the advocacy of Richard Hart to say, no, we don't need this kind of control. We need to have our own thing. And then to see what he's done in advance. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't catch it. I just saw, oh, wow, system state copy. That means we're going to get copies of the coins. That's a great thing. That's the world's largest airdrop. But what I didn't realize is actually we're borrowing all of this value. And the proof of that is things like wrapped Bitcoin, and we see all this, conversation about, pairing the Ethereum copies with the Pulse Chain copies of coins. The fact that there's any value to wrapped Bitcoin, the fact that there's any value to wrapped ETH, that there's any value in any of these stable coins at all is amazing. And I don't know that you see it that same way. You're like, well, the price is, it's 100x away from $1. No. The fact that it has any value says that value is created by people in agreement. We made this thing have value because we said it has value. That's where the power is, folks. The power is in us, in our agreement. Our made-up internet money is better than the government's made-up internet money is so true. And so one of the things I think is really important is for us to constantly remind ourselves of what's at stake. I say it all the time. What's at stake is the loss of this financial system to the centralized planners. You could just say, hey, I don't want to know. And this is the Matrix story, right? The guy that wants to go back into the Matrix. He's like, I want to remember nothing. Why does he say that? He's like, I've given up on fighting this battle. Well, what is this battle? Well, we're fighting more with each other than we are this battle. And this battle is really serious. This is the first time in human history that financial power and political power have been separated. Think about that. Raoul Pal was one of the first people I ever heard say that. This is the first time in human history where political power and financial power have been separated. What does that mean? In the past, you'd win a war, you'd kill the other guys, you'd steal their gold, and you'd rewrite the rules in your favor, right? Political power drove the economic power, right? So you controlled the guns, and then you controlled the people. And when you control the people, you control the financial system. This is a time where the people, that's us, are saying, no, we're going to have our own money. And they're like, what do you mean you can't have your own money? I mean, I go home at night and I talk to my wife. She's like, how can you do that? How can you make up your own money? I thought that was only the government's. And I said, what is the government if it is not at the consent of the governed? Do you realize we created the government? People don't see that. You're born into it and you're like, oh, no, I'm under the authority of the Constitution. You are not. We find these rights to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights. They're not subject to the king or to the Constitution. These are things that you have regardless of the system that you create that brings about life, liberty, and happiness. And so when you think about it, you sit on your school board or you sit in your, in your city council or something, and you're trying to decide about trash or you're trying to decide about right of way or whatever it may be. You're thinking about what's going to be the best for all of us. And when you think in those local terms, you're like, well, we're not trying to enslave our local people, but you have to decide those things. And what has gotten to the point is we've forgotten who we are in this system. We think that the people, the elites in Washington or wherever they may be, that we're underneath them, that we are submitting ourselves to it. And people often talk about this idea, like, you're coming underneath this Constitution. It has authority over you. It does not have authority over you. The Constitution, you agree to it. It's like anything. What's the speed limit? Well, it's kind of for your safety. We agree to it. And some people drive fast and some people crash, right? But we say, in order to have a civilized society, we have to have some basic rules. And then the people that break the rules, we have law, and we say, you know what? Instead of just a king deciding, we're going to have a jury of your peers. If you think about where this all comes from, it all ultimately comes from, a civilized society would have rules. But we have set up those rules, and most people don't realize that we actually set them up. And that's what the problem is, ultimately, that we're just okay with coming up underneath this authority. You turn on the TV and it's like, all right, let's check where the government says, the governor today says where we can go and if we can go out of our houses. Folks, that happened. Right? Think about this. There were people who said, my father died, I want to go to his funeral. And the government said no. Does that seem wrong to you? Yeah. And under this auspice of concern for you, dictating your inalienable rights, that you can go here, you can't go there, you have to, it's amazing what happened. And we see this rise in authoritarianism. If I could grab you by the lapels, if you were wearing a jacket, and shake you, I would say, stop fighting with your neighbor and look at actually what's coming right in front of us. We have such an opportunity with this pulse chain. We have all of the benefits of Ethereum 2.0 sitting right in front of us, right? We've got a lot of good infrastructure. We don't have all of it. We don't have a decentralized stablecoin. The other thing we don't have is we don't have real world assets. And that's what I'm focusing on, is how do we bring a tremendous amount of new liquidity? So let's make an equivalent here. Larry Fink is looking out at all of these assets going, let's tokenize all of them and bring them under our umbrella. You know what we should be doing? We should be saying, look at all of these assets. We should tokenize them and bring them under our umbrella. Why? Because what he is seeing is the same thing that would be a benefit to us, and that is increased liquidity. The two biggest reasons of people I talk to that don't jump into, Hex or Pulse Chain or any of this thing, like many of us did, is because they asked two important questions. What's it backed by? Number one, and can I get out? So just, I'm going to say it again. What's it backed by? And can I get out? Until we have locked liquidity, until we have a lot more liquidity, meaning you can get out, right? Everybody's like, hodl, man, diamond hands. Yeah, I want you to be diamond hands so that I can sell before you, right? That's an extraction model. We're just stealing from each other. No. What if, think about this for a second. I'll use gold in the ground as an example. Gold is in the ground and it takes effort to get it out. The basis of mining is how Bitcoin built its system to say, hey, this is really difficult to solve this SHA-256 algorithm and to mine Bitcoin. We know it takes energy, it takes time, and then there's this halvening process, and that's built into it. And it reflects the concept of actually mining, gold out of the ground. Well, some places gold is easy to get. That would be like placer mining. Hard rock mining is harder, but there's probably more to get. Do you know how much effort and time and energy in, years it takes to develop a mining asset in order to be in production? It's not like you just go dig it up and pan it out and there it is. That's not how, big time mining happens. But if you think about it, there's value. And, I've dabbled in the gold mining industry. And what's interesting about it is there's a tremendous amount of value that is sitting in the ground. I worked with a group that did oil and gas work in Texas. And I knew a gentleman whose grandfather, he drilled the first well in the Austin Chalk. And if you know anything about gold or oil drilling, that's a big deal. And what's amazing is there are some of those oil wells that are still producing since like 1978. And they've, of course, declined over time. But the technology's changed. And so when I look at my friend's assets, he's got a tremendous amount of assets and they're producing these wells, and then they've got opportunities to drill other wells on land. But what he said to me, he goes, you don't realize how much up pipe potential there is. And so to help you understand, up pipe potential means you drill down into a hole, into a zone, right? That's a formation underground, and that formation is known to produce oil and gas. And so you go down into that spot and basically open it up. You might do a horizontal leg out. You might acidize it. You might frack it. But what you're trying to do ultimately is to produce from that zone, right? From that formation. But what you don't realize is you went down a mile into the ground. Well, there's all of these other zones above. And so, you might relate to this, the Barnett Shale, right? The Barnett Shale had a ton of oil and gas in it, but it wasn't economical to get out until the price went up, and then until fracking came. So technological advancements have made this attractive. The other is oil sands. Oil sands, it was too expensive to get it out. So as technology progresses, there's all of this opportunity that exists out there, and there are people, regular people, who own these assets. The problem is there's no revenue that comes from up pipe potential, right? You just have it. It's there, but there's a value to it, but you have it's a non-yield bearing asset to you. And so now let's take it into the gold mining industry. The gold mining industry is built around reserves, and these are the ore body that you've proven that's in the ground. Well, what about everything else? There's a lot of properties that have a lot of gold that is either measured or inferred. Well, they don't give you any value for that. And so here you are, somebody that owns this gold mining property. It's got tremendous amount of potential, but you're years away from production. People like BlackRock and us need to see those assets and say, hang on a second, we can value those assets at a fair market value today. And that can be liquidity into the DeFi ecosystem. And if you understand what I just said, your head should explode. That's what BlackRock's doing. They're saying, you know what? We can give a discounted value to stuff that's in the ground. I can give a discounted value to stuff that's up pipe. I understand that there's a certain cost, but it's there. That's what the battle is for. BlackRock is trying to literally tokenize the world. And once they've got a hold of these assets and tokenization, they then basically have control. Well, the same thing we can do. But here's what's interesting. Everybody that owns assets, for the most part, are people. And who are those people? They're different people from different walks of life. But there's more of us than there are of them, right? These elites look down their noses at us and they're like, oh, you guys shop at Walmart and like NASCAR. When in reality, we're actually the asset holders. And as a group, we hold the assets, not just the corporate guys, but they want to take it. That's why they say you will own nothing and be happy. That's why. This is the whole thing. They want to own everything. And then they want to give you a universal basic income and tell you what to do. It's called slavery. And so this is such a pivotal moment in human history for us to actually set up and stand up an alternative financial system where you don't have to bow down to centralized authorities to be able to transact. Because if there is no ability to transact privately, then there is no freedom. So I believe that we need to give the gift of DeFi to the world. And you know what's funny about this? You ever have something like when I was a kid, right? I grew up super blue collar, right on the poverty line. My dad worked in a factory in the automotive industry in Detroit. You know, we only got something for Christmas and your birthday. And I remember one year, I think it was maybe my senior year in high school. I got up in the morning for Christmas and there was a box that was wrapped. And it was a 4-ton floor jack. You ever got it in a 4-ton floor jack for Christmas? Now, that's if you're in the automotive industry, you know that's pretty handy. But when it's Christmas, you're not thinking, well, this might come in handy one day. And so I had a Pontiac 6000 and I stuck that floor jack in that box in the trunk and I drove around with that thing in my trunk for years. I took that thing to college. I didn't even take it out of the box until one evening. It was around sunset. I went out for a run. And I'm running, and this is on the campus where I went to college. And I hear out of the corner of my ear, I hear, help me, help me. And this guy with this really, really labored voice is saying, help me. I'm probably 300 yards from my apartment. I'm like, what's going on? I'm looking at what's going on. And I stop. He's like, help me. And I look underneath this car that's on this guy's lawn. And he was working under the car and the car rolled back onto his chest. And so if you've ever been under a car, it was on somewhat of an uneven lawn. And he literally got pinched underneath it and the car rolled back. And so the frame and probably the transmission and everything had depressed his chest and he couldn't breathe. And so it's like almost nighttime. This guy is alone and he's underneath the car. And I run by and I literally freak out. Can you imagine that? It's like this. I didn't know if the car had fallen off a jack and crushed this guy, but I learned later it didn't. So I was like freaking out. I ran as fast as I could. And the thing that came into my mind was that damn 4-ton floor jack. And it had been sitting in my trunk for years since that Christmas. And I literally grabbed my keys, opened the trunk. I ripped that thing out of the box and ran with this 4-ton floor jack and jacked up that car off that guy. He comes out of the underneath that thing. And he's looking at me. He's kind of, he probably didn't have much oxygen. Called 911. Like every fire truck in the whole city came. And this guy's just kind of out of it. And I'm like, dude, just sit down. And all the police come and all this stuff. And I'm like looking around and, everybody's attending to this guy and all this situation. And I grab my floor jack and I walking back and I put it in my trunk. Well, the next morning I wake up and I go out again that morning and here's that guy walking across the street. And he looks at me and I look at him. And he goes, hey, are you the guy that jacked the car off my chest? I said, yeah, I am. He goes, hey, man, I'd been there for several hours. He's like, thank you so much for doing that. That's a pretty lengthy story to say you don't realize what the tools that you're given today will impact tomorrow. And that's the thing that I see here. I see that we have something in front of us that we're thinking, oh, man, this sucks, man. The price isn't where I need it to be. You don't realize this tool that we have of the blockchain, this tool that we have of the pulse chain and all this potential infrastructure, and then the genius that's leading it, even though he's fighting this fraud case with the SEC, you have to see the long term of this, because it's not just a matter of, well, when am I going to have my money and when's my Lambo coming? No, if we don't defend this and we don't build right and we don't think about this the right way, it's just going to be like, all right, we made a couple bucks. A couple guys got rich at the expense of other guys who came late. And we didn't really create or redefine something that actually freed the captives rather than enslaving them. And that's what it's all about. And that's what I would say to you. If you're somebody out there who has resources and you've been blessed, you have a responsibility. And, when I think about this idea of what does the future look like when regular people have an abundance, do we continue to create more gate-kept organizations and systems? Or do we break the systems back and have an alternative? But I think if we don't know what the alternative is, we just recreate the thing that enslaves us again. It says in the Bible, a guy was, he went to, he had his, all of his debts canceled, right? The guy that he owed money to said, hey, I'll forgive all the debts. And he left that place and went and beat the guy that owed him money. And you're like, hold on a second. I've been forgiven so much. I should freely forgive those, right? It happened to me. I should happen to them. And I think that there's a lot of people in this, and I'm thankful because I've met a lot of you guys that are really actually pretty focused on this stuff, that you realize that blessing. Hey, the background's gone. There it is. And you realize, yeah, I got into this thing and the timing was great and it's changed my life. But it seems like there's more to this story, that I have a responsibility. And it's not for me to dictate, but that's the essence of generosity. That's the essence of how do we formulate this thing? How do we take the lead of Richard Hart, which is to say, hey, we need to defend freedom of speech and movement and privacy and transactions. And we need to build an alternative financial system. And so when I see all the detail that's coming out about what Richard has done, in my opinion, with the PDI contract, the maker contract, and that what he's preparing for, and you look across crypto and you're like, even though with the ETF in Bitcoin, we saw Bitcoin kind of hit this all-time high, Ethereum hasn't at all. It did a little punch up and now it's, down, what, $3,200, $2,900? I don't know. Here's the thing. You're so worried about this next, bull run. It's coming. It has to come because they have to print more money. You don't realize this, but ultimately all of this stuff is priced in, and the Federal Reserve has no choice but to turn the money printer back on. The question is, when they do that, are we prepared to solidify our own separate alternative financial system? Because if we can get it set up, once people wake up and realize, oh, you weren't just worried about my health. You weren't just worried about that. You were actually trying to control me. And you're doing that for your own profit. Once they wake up and realize, oh, I do have a digital ID and a social credit score. And oh, all my investments are numbered. And the IRS is basically watching everything I do. You go, is there any other place I can do this where I don't have that? And of course, think about that in its analog is people leaving, England and leaving this monarchy to come to the New World. Why? Because it was too, authoritarian, right? They wanted religious freedom. They wanted to get out from underneath this heavy hand. And now we've got this global heavy hand that if they win, they've taken it all. And you just heard BlackRock, Larry Fink. This is what we're doing. We're going to gobble up all of the value in the world. Well, we have a vision and we have the infrastructure and the capability and the intellect and the right people and the resources to be able to do it. Question is, are we going to do it? I'm prepared to do it. Richard Hart's prepared to do it. And so it's less about going, well, is Pulse X going to do a 10,000X? I understand that you're concerned about yourself. I totally get it. But all this requires is that you're considerate of others in addition to yourself. Right? That's all it requires. Because I think a lot of people, I watch a lot of these new coins get launched and it's great, right? But one of the things I see in every single situation is the snipers, right? They snipe things. They're watching the router, and they watch the router and they watch liquidity hit the router. And you'll see these people in the very first seconds put in a certain amount based on the liquidity that's being put in. And then they'll literally buy up, $1,000, and then they'll sell for 35,000, and they're in it for maybe 6 minutes, and they're sniping things. And then that we see people who work together in paid groups to pump something so that it gets on the radar of other crypto investors so that they can literally sell into their buying. And that's a collusion technique. But if you think about it, if you actually cared about others in addition to yourself, you'd realize that's just theft in and of itself. It's just anonymous and legal. And so if your whole attitude is, I don't really care if other people lose, I want to win, well, then this is just for you. It's the casino for you. But this casino, the house wins in the end. And when we look at somebody like Larry Fink and BlackRock, that's the house. That's the system. It's been built since the beginning to enslave. And so how do we unlock that, and how does it have abundance? That's the big question. I'm going to get back into the chat, and then I've got one more thing to share with you. Thanks for being here. I appreciate you listening to this, this banter, if you will. Let's see. Daniel. What's up, Daniel? Good to see you, man. I haven't seen you in a while. Good evening to you. Academaciated Afternoon Heartbeat and Fam. Moondog's back. Dude, how are you, sir? Force of One, what's up? The week always have a number, right? Sometimes I'll tattoo it on your arm. Hexonium, the right-wing cabinet became a fact in the Netherlands yesterday. Well, is there hope? How do you feel about that, Hexonium? Dan McMillan, what's up, man? This is exactly what I've been trying to tell people, that crypto is more than making money. And certainly no margin, no mission. So John, I'm with you, but that's why I say, just consider others in addition to yourself. Understand what you're promoting, right? Are you promoting a scheme that actually takes from people dumber than you, right? And I think there's a lot of people like, hey, I paid the dumb taxes. People took advantage of me. I wasn't in 2017. But now, hey, these guys got to pay the dumb taxes. I'll take money from them. There's something that's not right about it. And I don't mean that it's just a moral thing. I think that we can do better. And that's what Richard Hart is setting up for. He's not setting up for, hey, here's ways you can scam each other. No, actually, he warned against that. That's why he says don't leverage trade. And that's why he warns about all these people coming in to siphon value. But I think the future here is that we have a community that is probably one of the most well-educated when it comes to decentralized finance. I talk to people that have been Bitcoin maxis and they have no idea about DeFi, what it really means. We understand these true tenets of DeFi. We learned it from Richard, and we learned it from each other, and we understand these principles. And it's the key of that is that actually is a different system. But what do? We take those systems, we animate them, and we take advantage of others. There is a possibility for an abundance. And how does BlackRock see that abundance? They see it as consolidation for themselves to win. What if we were to take those assets that are in the ground, whether it be up pipe or within, in the ground of these different assets, it can be of all different types, and we bring that fair market value and tokenization into the Pulse chain? Well, what does it do? One, it increases lock liquidity. Now, that creates a lot more stability, which you might not like because you like the volatility of, low liquidity, fast moving things. But the long term is it's got to stabilize and it's got to be backed by something. And it answers two of the biggest questions that people have that are outside of crypto. What's it backed by, and how can I get out? Those are the things I think we need to solve. So if you're interested in any of that stuff that I've been talking about, I'm putting together a private Telegram group. You can DM me on Twitter. You can DM me on Telegram. It's Crypto Heartbeat 22. A number of people have already done that, but we're going to have a group and we're going to be talking about doing this very thing. How do we have all of these necessary things when it comes to real world assets and bringing a tremendous amount of lock liquidity? Because here's the thing. If we have more lock liquidity in DeFi, especially in the Pulse chain, then there's more confidence people can have about investing more because they know that if they get in, they can get out. I think about some of these OG hexagons. And, whether it be the God whale or just really big time whales, just imagine Richard Hart's in this exact position. You're somebody that's got all this Bitcoin, all this Ethereum, right? And let's say on paper, you have $1 billion. You're like, woohoo, I've got $1 billion. Where are you going to get that out? How are you going to get that to fiat, right? What are your limits? Even if you've got some corporate account or some specialized account with Coinbase or something, they're restricting the amount of fiat you can get out. So even if you on paper, like I'm a gazillionaire, okay, it's on paper. So there are people who got into Hex, for example, or Ethereum at the very, very, very beginning, and they made some really good decisions. And on paper, when we were at 52 cents, holy buckets, hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. But if you look at the on-chain analysis of what really people got out, it's not a tremendous amount of money because of liquidity. Even though it was relatively thick at the height of things, it pales in comparison to the traditional financial world or even kind of the Bitcoin Ethereum world. We have to have a significant amount of increased liquidity that's locked so that you know you're not getting rugged, and that people that actually want to invest in trustless yield go, okay, I have faith that it's not going to get pulled out from under me, and I might actually take a little bit bigger risk on my portfolio in this DeFi system. But until we have that, we're just going to basically be the gamblers. And hey, folks, we can do this, right? There are people all across the world that get this, that understand that, no, I'm not doing tokenization of my assets with BlackRock, right? And the securitize.io guys. No, because I don't want to be caught up in that system. I actually want to utilize my resources and my assets, whether it be crypto or otherwise, to ultimately help free the captives, unlock generosity, to ultimately promote freedom, just defending people's ability to make their own damn decisions. That's how I see it. John May, yes, the gains are nice, but it's our chance to become free from the bank elites. That's right. Take that back to power. What's up, Hex on Air? Good to see you. Hextra T-shares, get them. Chocolate. Ease and Chill is here, Daniel. Finally catch you live again, and what you say is so important. Thanks, man. I appreciate that. Just trying to, I feel like I'm a very lone voice. I think I'm consistently telling you these things. And I think that I see what's happening here. And it's partly because I'm an old guy and I don't just look at I'm not just looking at this next cycle and bull run. I'm looking at what's the world going to look like for my kids. That concerns me. I like some of the technological things, but I certainly don't like the financial system that we're giving to them. GCLLC, tokenization of assets makes it easier for government to seize assets. Terrible idea. Okay. So enjoy your speculative casino. You don't realize tokenization of assets, you're assuming that they're tokenized by the centralized authorities. I don't know if you know this, but assets, backing, right? We have fiat that used to be backed by gold and silver. You're right that there is centralized entities that will own those things. But here's the thing. I think all tools are neutral and they are animated with a certain nature and character. So let's say a gun sitting on a table. That gun could be used to, defend your family. It could also be used for hunting. It could also be used to shoot up a school. And the butt of it could be used to hang a picture. The gun isn't what's doing it. It's you. What is your nature and character? And the question is, who are the asset holders? And what is their nature and character? And what do they want to do with those assets? You're right in the sense that, well, if you just only want to operate that absolutely everyone is anonymous and that there's no asset backing for any way, the house is going to ultimately win anyway. So the question is, how do we take these true tenets of DeFi and we empower them with a different nature and character? That's the whole point. That's our choice to make. So don't participate in that. Lock liquidity for Hex is a smart contract would be nice. It would be nice. Well, and you think about this in an automated market maker, who wants to tie up their money? So that's why tokenization is really interesting, because fair market value, and that's why you can tokenize things that there's so much more value to tokenize, which brings in real liquidity, but it doesn't have the cost of you literally outlaying, you got to put in a bunch of fiat to go to, PLS, and then you take your PLS and you let's say bond it or pair it, in a V2 contract, for example. So the beauty of this is you unlock all of this liquidity, and that's part of the problem we have. But we have to have things that are substantial, because you also have to relate that it's also a narrative. There's a lot of fear in this world. Well, what nature and character? When you think about investing in things, you invest in people, right? I mean, trust is ultimately going to be the currency. But why do we like DeFi? Because we don't trust the centralized authorities. 22.45. Wow, that's big per T-share. Whoa, that's big. Doberman, it feels hard to get out of the speculative niche without tapping into real world good. I think moving over to tokenization is a great first step. Well, and at the end of the day, the regular people don't really have to move over to tokenization. We need to mature as a community. We have to have this infrastructure. I mean, you don't have to own a gold mine and tokenize it, but you'd sure like somebody who appreciates DeFi to do that. Because I'm going to tell you right now, BlackRock ain't putting their money into the Pulse chain. And they're going to suck up all that stuff and promise the world to these people. Well, those people are still out there with those assets, and BlackRock hasn't gotten to them. That's why it's a battle for these things. But what if somebody who understood the vision of Richard Hart, understood the decentralization of the Pulse chain, and said, you know what? I'm going to take my assets and I'm going to pledge these in, and you're going to value them better than the market does. And I'm going to actually stimulate, with all of this new liquidity and earn fees, because it then takes an asset that's non-yield bearing and makes it yield bearing. Yeah, it's great to have this gold, but they charge me to store it. Well, what if they could tokenize that gold and you got paid? Well, it's a non-yield bearing asset, but it's a store of value that I'm keeping in my, under my bed. Goods. Gotcha. Ramon. What's up, Ramon Carilla? What's up, fam? Good to see you, buddy. All right. I'm gonna take a left turn. We're gonna literally take a fork in the road here. And I just want to share one other thing, and this is bonus content. It's pretty obvious to me that the ultimate change that's going to have to be made isn't just financial. It's not the measurement or the use of proxies for our labor. Because money in and of itself is just a proxy for your personal labor, because there's no value outside of personal labor. And it comes in the form of two things, goods and services, right? So when we talk about real value, not speculative value, but real value, you're like, what do I need? Well, I need my oil changed in my car. I could do it myself, or I could hire someone. They provide a service to me, right? The goods would be obviously the oil and the filter. But if you think about this, all that exists in value is really from human creativity and human labor. So whether it be tilling the soil, whether you use technology or not, it has to be the decision of the creative person to do that. So that's where real value exists. And if you really boil it down, it's ultimately in the seed. We need water and we need food. Certainly shelter comes really quickly after that. But if you really boil this down, if we were in an apocalyptic world, you have more of something, I need it. I've got more of something, you need it, right? I'll trade you my corn for your eggs, whatever it may be. And we see that barter system. That will happen wherever people exist. And there are different people with different skill sets, thank God. And they can produce different types of things. This guy over here can fix your engine or whatever it is, right? And so we work in community and we trade value. And in many cases, if you don't have a proxy like money, or a means to exchange things that makes it more convenient, you end up exchanging the actual hard goods or the actual service. And we see that in the old mining towns. We see that in the old West. But because we have this means of exchange, where fiat currency, for example, that's not backed by anything anymore, it just becomes a shared fiction. It's something that we all agree to. But what's driving, I think, the majority of this enslavement is ultimately energy. And so this is the bonus component of this. I believe we're going to see in the next 5 or 10 years the breakthrough in technology. And if you're a nerd like me, there is a guy who used to work for NASA. His name is Dr. Charles Bueller. And he had a patent in 2018. And he's coming out with a new one. And it's ultimately related to electrostatic pressure. He worked at NASA for a long time. He's a physicist. And, he actually, creates things he did it for spacecraft and such like that. But one of the things he's discovered is potentially a new part of understanding the very nature of the physical world. And he has found that through electrostatics. There was a guy named Townsend Brown back in the 30s who was known for his work with asymmetrical capacitors. Well, a big breakthrough has happened recently by Dr. Richard Bueller that shows that asymmetric capacitors have a force without a load. And if you look into this, this is ultimately the beginnings of what we would call anti-gravity. Now that's like, woo, UFO stuff. No, no, no. If you can affect mass, and if you can affect perceived mass from ultimately what's considered the quantum fluctuation, which is really the Casimir effect, what's happening in the quantum fluctuation, that mathematically they say that there's this tremendous amount of energy that's in the background of the quantum vacuum. Some people call it the 0-point energy field. It looks like he has discovered how to engage with it. Well, what that means is that ultimately we're going to find ourselves in a future of very, very cheap, if not free energy. That fundamentally, if it is open sourced, right? If it's gotten out into the wild, and I think we've got the tools to properly do that, that sets so many people free. We know about Mad Energy within our community they bought the assets from the Zenic wave technology, which is Wardenclyffe Tower. That's what Tesla was doing back in the day before JP Morgan shut them down. Wireless energy, that's distribution. What we're seeing coming, and I think is really coming, is ultimately a new source of energy. And it's not fusion, right? And it's not just like a clean nuclear. It's one that is so abundant and taps into the very wheelwork of nature, which Tesla talked about. We're on the doorsteps of that. If we have an economic system that is separate, and then we see these technological advances, we may find ourselves in a situation that is tremendous, a new renaissance of sorts. And we would look back at this and go, remember when we were fighting over these things? Remember we were fighting over oil? We were fighting over all of these things that are scarce. Well, they were artificially there. And so I have hope for the future. I'm just kind of giving you some of the nerdy things that I'm interested in. But at the end of the day, at the core of a lot of these disputes are really economics, right? I mean, why is Crimea so important to Russia, right? Oil and gas. Why were the Abraham Accords signed? It was negotiated because of the benefits to going across Israel with a pipeline. I mean, these are economic advantages to be able to do these things. And what is it all built on? A lot of it's built on energy. Why did we blow up the Nord Stream pipeline, right? So that we can sell oil and gas to Europe. Germany's fine with that. They're just paying 4 times as much for petroleum. But that's the exciting part. Because we don't think about that when we're thinking about one Lambo and maybe the next, when's the next bull run, man? No, there's a future that's potentially coming. But the question is, who are going to be the people that are leading? And what kind of nature and character do they have? I would love to see my children and my grandkids grow up in a new Renaissance era. And, the way things look, that will potentially happen after this crisis era. But wouldn't it be amazing that as this Babylon burns within an hour, that we have been responsible for putting together the infrastructure for an alternative financial system? I believe it's possible. And if you're interested, let me know. It's important to do. And if you know people that have assets, there's incredible things that can be done in tokenization that help all of us, to bring a tremendous amount of liquidity into this market. And so these are the things that I think about day to day. These are the things that we're working on. And so there's a lot more to this story than you see. But to me, I'm not focused on, hey, how can we create the newest buy and burn contract? How can we get people to, basically, how can we exchange money with people that are already in our community? No. How do we give the gift of DeFi to the world? And then when it comes time when they have no other options and they're looking around going, what is the alternative to this? They're going to see the Pulse chain and they're going to see what we built. And I think that that's really, truly the vision of Richard Hart. But he can't do it all. So are we building in the right direction? Thank you for joining the Pulse today. I appreciate you. Hexangelo, good to see you. The only one. Get it. What's up, buddy? It's so good to see you. I'm going to be down in San Antonio for the Republican convention. This is a Republican Party convention representing Texan token at that convention in San Antonio, and maybe I'll run into you, my friend. It's power and control, not economics. Economics is just the face, the excuse. Yeah, there you go. It's energy control of all things. Wow, thanks, A1. At the end of the day, tokenized or not, it's the ability to hold those assets from being taken away from you and me. Dude, wonderful. Wonderful. You said it way better than I did. Dobermain says tokenization assets, stocks, maybe when Robinhood freeze. Yeah, GameStop. If it was hosted on a decentralized platform, that could not have happened. There's a DeFi Robinhood that could be a sweet thing. Yeah, exactly. And you think about this, what are they trying to shut down? And this is the thing that I've always said is I feel like they're taking their own poison pill. And why? Because they're essentially building a system that is, I think, going to ultimately devour them. And what do we need to do? Well, we want everything now, right? I want 10,000x tomorrow. But we can sow these seeds for these tools and this infrastructure so that these things can happen, right? That there can be a place where you can have these trading platforms that can't be shut down because somebody shut down AWS. And these are decisions. The good news, even though I don't trust, centralized authorities, there are sensible people in this world who are like, there are some jurisdictions like the Isle of Man. There's places in Dubai. There are places where they're really favorable to crypto and actually have reasonable regulatory environments. Why do you think the whole BRICS thing? Why are people in Africa going with Russia and China? The West is failing, my friends. And this system, we're gonna go down a blaze of glory. I just want to make sure that there's something here standing that we can, we'll inherit, right? Because all those people have nowhere to go, and it will show them the way. Right now, you can lead a horse to water, you just can't make him drink. Thank you so much for joining the Pulse today. My name is Matt. This is Crypto Heartbeat, and don't mess with Texas. See ya.